My lords, our galaxy is home to many wonders, some of which are quite polarizing indeed. The so-called Colossus Superweapon is perhaps the most polarizing technology of all. Some call it efficient, others will scream genocide, and perhaps justifiably so. However, what many of you may be unaware of is that our galaxy has 9 unique patterns of Colossus Superweapon. Today I'll detail all of them for you, and I'll rank them based on the diplomatic fallout you will receive from firing one of these superweapons.
Fire at will, Commander.
We'll begin with potentially the most acceptable option when it comes to galactic genocide, the Global Pacifier. The Pacifier is a masterpiece of technology. Furthermore, it does, in my opinion, demonstrate a marvellous level of restraint. The device creates a permanent, impenetrable energy shield around a planet. It effectively locks that planet away for the rest of time, or at least functionally forever. We are aware that light and heat can still pass through the barrier, thus death for the inhabitants is not guaranteed, although I do suspect that if they were reliant on interstellar trade for food or any key mechanical components, they're probably going to be in some trouble. We have examples of active shields throughout the galaxy. Notable mentions include Gish, the homeworld of the Priki-Tiki, and the homeworld of Tubarek, the xenophobic Fallen Empire general, locked away for all time due to some perceived war crimes. Interestingly, we are aware that time fluctuates or flows quite differently behind the shields, but we're unsure if this is an intended consequence or not. Notable users of the device are the xenophilic Fallen Empire, the enigmatic Observers. They appear to enjoy observing the aliens that they've locked behind the shields, building orbiting laboratories and providing a steady stream of society research. We assume that they enjoy watching a trapped society deconstruct itself over millennia. From a diplomatic standpoint, however, the pacifier is the cleanest or perhaps safest option. The Galcom is much less inclined to sanction this behaviour. Of all of the super weapons on the list, it is by far the most acceptable, despite the planet almost certainly falling into ruin within decades of its use. The opinion penalty for firing the device is a mere 200 for the victim and 20 from everyone else. It's probably the most polite way to conduct genocide. Moving on to the Divine Enforcer, which I think is rather abhorrent. The galaxy doesn't necessarily seem to mind as much, at least when you compare it to some of the other ways of killing your enemies. The Enforcer uses high-frequency psionic radiation, and it fires it straight through the planetary atmosphere, bathing the planet in this murky radiation. However, this device doesn't kill organics. No, nothing so pedestrian. It unlocks a so-called spiritual awakening in every person. Every single organic across the planet will suddenly decide that the gods are real, life is sacred, and they must devote themselves to a pious way of life. What's interesting to me is whether or not there are more specific variants of the device. For example, if an empire worships the Eater of Worlds, would they not want a device that somewhat converts the target species to their sort of flavour of spiritualism? Maybe individual empires can tweak them. An interesting thought. In any case, the people don't die, they're converted to your cause, or at least your ethics. However, the technology does have its limits. Since this process targets the psionic potential of a mind, any entity lacking the proper hardware for a soul, like a robot, synth, or a machine intelligence, they're simply just destroyed. Furthermore, should you choose to target an AI world or machine world, the feedback loop is so violent it simply tears the planet apart, cracking it entirely. Interestingly, we have witnessed empires choosing to deploy this on their own planets to fix potential rebellions. While this would certainly settle any ethics debates or potential uprisings, it does lead to a not insignificant happiness penalty for about 10 years. Apparently, having your worldview forcibly overwritten by a psionic death ray is quite bad for overall morale. From a diplomatic standpoint, however, the fallout is very reasonable. The victim will understandably be quite upset at a minus 400 opinion penalty, but the rest of the galaxy views it as mostly a private religious matter, and only comes with a minus 40 penalty. So in a world of galactic ethics, it's twice as horrible as the Global Pacifier, but not anywhere near as bad as what's to come. Of course, my lords, at this stage, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think is the worst war crime? Shielding a planet, leaving it to suffer and rot, or turning a population into somewhat mind-controlled spiritualists? This brings us on to the next, and there are two devices that sort of fit into the same category, as they both terraform planets forcibly and very quickly, giving no regard for the inhabitants. The first is the Deluge machine. This device is designed for the true trailblazer. Not only did the inventor of this device find ground invasions tedious, they also figured out a way to create a paradise for their own species. What's better than conquering a planet, conquering one that your people are perfectly suited to live on immediately? By utilizing an extremely complicated high-output atmospheric condenser, the machine floods the entire planetary surface in a single firing cycle. The results are both inspirational and damning. Every non-aquatic species will be instantly killed, and all existing districts will be washed away. The planet, incidentally, will then be terraformed into an ocean world. What is interesting is aquatic species will survive the deluge, being perfectly suited to living on an ocean world anyway. The galactic community is fairly sensitive on this one. The victim will respond with a minus 600 opinion penalty, and everyone else will hit you with a minus 60. It seems that the sight of a world being drowned is a little bit more disturbing than shielding it or converting their people to spiritualists, since I guess in this case you are directly killing the inhabitants if they're not aquatic. So it does feel appropriate that the levels of galactic discourse are higher, which in a similar vein moves us on to the next one, the planet Smelter. Where the Deluge machine is for those who prefer the cold embrace of the deep dark sea, the Smelter is for those who enjoy turning up the heat. The Smelter is a device pioneered by thermophiles. This device will subject the target world to a cascading thermal event, effectively turning the entire surface of the planet into a molten furnace. Upon firing, every non-thermophile, lithoid or machine will be quite literally set alight, unable to withstand the heat. I find it somewhat odd that whereas the Deluge manages to purge all life but aquatic, this one does leave some wiggle room. Is it odd, for example, that machines and lithoids are able to survive the heat but not the water? I'm not sure. Furthermore, habitable planets are instantly terraformed into volcanic worlds, and uninhabited worlds are rendered into molten worlds. From a diplomatic standpoint, the bathing of a planet with molten rock will carry a significant penalty. The same as the Deluge, the victim will respond with a minus 600 opinion penalty, and the rest of the galaxy will respond with 60. Next on the list we have the Nanobot Diffuser. This wonderfully designed device is unique to driven assimilator empires. This device will utilize a massive nanite replication array to saturate a planet's atmosphere with a cloud of hyperactive nanites. As you may have already guessed, since the device is unique to driven assimilators, the nanites have one single goal: to convert your uniqueness and add them to their collective. This device will convert all biological species into cybernetics, bringing them into the driven assimilator collective. Every robot, synth or hive mind will be killed, although perhaps oddly, the device doesn't actually touch the flora itself. The planet is not terraformed and left largely untouched. What this also means is, as long as there was some biological species that lived on the planet, the collective will gain immediate control of said planet. There'll be no need for any follow-up colonization or ground assault. From a diplomatic standpoint, the galaxy views this as a violation, of course, on the same level as the Deluge and Smelter devices. Again, I would ask you, my lords, do you think this is reasonable? What's worse, mechanically assimilating an entire planet, or death by overwhelming elements? To round it up, if you were to use this device, the victim will respond with a minus 600 penalty, and the rest of the galaxy, likely fearing for themselves, will give you a minus 60 penalty. We've got 4 colossal superweapons left to discuss, and this one is my personal favourite. This device, unlike perhaps any of the other Colossus, is about sending a message. And that message comes in the Devolving beam, a beautiful, wonderful piece of technology. I find it truly diabolical a device like this even exists. Indeed, we believe it is linked to an ancient empire who were uplifted by so-called giants. In any case, this device essentially turns the sapient species back to monkey. Using humanity as an example, this device would turn us from the intelligent, reasonable, higher order creatures that we are back into essentially just a sentient mammal, like a monkey. An incredible piece of technology. Upon firing, most biological species will become forcibly devolved, losing their sapience and becoming simple fauna. Curiously, a single biological pop is also left unaffected, perhaps as a witness to the event, perhaps a subset of the population are immune. It's not entirely clear why this is the case, but nevertheless, it is. Furthermore, and I find this most interesting, the device has some relationship with archaeotech. Empires who are particularly advanced in the field of archaeotech can modify the device so that any machine or mechanical species are utterly destroyed during the same firing sequence. Normally, mechanical species would simply be unaffected by the Devolving beam, although perhaps it would be amusing to see a wooden robot, if that was such a thing. From a diplomatic standpoint, the galaxy finds the regression to be rather distasteful indeed, amusingly more distasteful than literally just genociding a planet with, say, the Smelter. The victim will respond with a -800 penalty, and everyone else will hit us with a -80. It's a heavy, but perhaps relative price for turning an empire into a nature documentary. I do wonder what would happen if an empire was so inclined to repeatedly fire this device at the same planet on a cycle. How far could we get the devolution to go? Perhaps an experiment is on the cards, my lords. Moving on, we have 3 left. First up, we have the Neutron Sweep. The Neutron Sweep is likely to be the cleanest solution to any galactic problem. I can see the Megacorp adverts now. This superweapon, via the wonders of high-intensity neutron radiation, will cleanse a planet of all biological life while leaving the valuable infrastructure, factories, power plants, housing, etc., completely intact. The device is calibrated to penetrate deep into structures and bunkers, meaning that all biological life is effectively getting liquidated. But not just biological life, machines and robots get deleted as well. There is a slight minor downside to this. Due to this radiation deep clean, the planet will take approximately a decade to recover from the radiation bath. You could colonize it, but we estimate approximately a 30% reduction in habitability for around 10 years. As a side note, this device in particular is marvellously effective at dealing with the Scourge. Rather than spending decades carpet bombing a planet, simply sweep them clean with the Neutron Sweep. From a diplomatic standpoint, this is of course a messy procedure. The sight of billions of corpses in perfectly intact cities will probably make it onto the news and likely upset the galactic community. The victim will respond with a -800 penalty and everyone else a -80. Interestingly, from a galactic community perspective, firing this device and deleting an entire planet's worth of people is as bad as turning them back to monkey. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that, my lords. Nevertheless, we've got 2 more left to discuss, and the next is perhaps the simplest and most common, yet probably the most brutal: the World Cracker. Whereas some of the other Colossus have sort of justifiable secondary functions, i.e. terraforming into an ocean world, the World Cracker is incredibly straightforward. Any empire using this does suggest a somewhat inspirational level of disregard for a planetary body, and whatever lives on it, by irreversibly shattering it into a cluster of broken fragments. Upon firing, the planet is utterly devastated beyond all repair, shattered into several parts, which incidentally can offer decent mining opportunities. Maybe telling the Galcom it's really just a large mining laser would get you some leeway perhaps. We've witnessed several World Crackers in action. Zatanna the Synthetic Queen has one attached to her mighty flagship, and the xenophobic isolationists have one as well. A relic of their past no doubt, but I'm sure they would use it again with glee if so provoked. From a diplomatic standpoint, this is the most heinous crime one can commit in our galaxy. Cracking a world will not go down well with anyone. It is not simply the genocide that upsets the people, it's the destruction of potential real estate. The victim will respond with a -1000 opinion, and the rest of the galaxy -100. But my lords, I have one final colossal superweapon to discuss, and this is an incredibly niche option, since it will only be accessible to empires who have met the toxic entity and managed to take control of the creature after they defeat it. The weapon carried by this entity is designed to saturate a planetary biosphere with lethal hyper-concentrated toxin. Upon firing, the result is rather unpleasant, even by general galactic genocidal standards. Every species on the planet will succumb to the toxins, while the planet itself is transformed into a toxic world. To most, this may seem like a waste of a perfectly good planet, but if an empire possesses the detox terraforming technology, this toxic world could eventually be reclaimed and made habitable once more. It feels like quite an awkward way to have a really deep clean of a planet, but I guess if it gets the job done. Most interestingly to me, however, is the diplomatic penalties for using such a device. It's on the same level as the World Cracker, so clearly the Galcom and galactic species in general view this as the most abhorrent thing one species can do to another. I guess dead is dead at the end of the day, but what do you think, my lords? Is being melted by raining toxins injected into your planet's atmosphere the worst way to go? I await your comments on the matter.